Good afternoon. Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 7 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll take up is related to India and Qatar relations, as the Emir of Qatar is visiting India and the two countries have elevated the status of the relationship to that of a strategic partnership. The second article is related to India-Nepal relations, as there was an uproar in the Nepal parliament regarding the alleged suicide by a student from Nepal in the Kalinga Institute of Industrial Technology. Additionally, we'll take up 5 articles in the simplified which will be useful for your prelims and mains preparation. Now, the first article is related to India-Qatar relations. The Emir of Qatar is visiting India and he was accorded a grand welcome by Prime Minister Modi. So we will discuss the significance of India-Qatar relations, the challenges that the relationship faces and the suggestions in this regard. We'll also have an overview of India's relations with the entire Gulf region, as India is looking to deepen its cooperation with the Gulf region. Now the relationship status between India and Qatar has been upgraded to that of a strategic partnership. This is important in GS2 under the topic Effect of Politics and Policies of Developed and Developing Countries on India's Interests and India's Diaspora. First, let's have a look at the map of Qatar. Qatar is located in the Persian Gulf region. It shares its land boundary with only one country, that is Saudi Arabia. On the western side, it is also bounded by the Gulf of Bahrain. 80% of Qatar's population resides in its capital city, Doha, and Qatar is home to world's third largest natural gas reserves. Now, why is Qatar significant for India? When we look at it from a geo-economic point of view, the trade between the two countries is significant. The bilateral trade between India and Qatar is valued at about $14 billion. And after the recent meet between Prime Minister Modi and the Emir of Qatar, the revised target is to double it by 2030. But there is a trade imbalance between the two countries. That is, the Indian exports to Qatar are way lesser than the India's imports from Qatar. India exports only about $2 billion worth of products to Qatar, and the imports is way more. But India serves as an export destination for Qatar. It is the third largest export destination for Qatar after China and Japan. South Korea is also a significant export destination for Qatar. And 48% of India's liquefied natural gas imports are coming from Qatar, as Qatar is the third largest natural gas reserve in the world. When we look at it from a geostrategic point of view, India is cooperating with Qatar as we have a defense cooperation agreement put in place since 2008. India also participates in the DIMDEX conference. It is the Doha International Maritime Exhibition and Conference. The two countries also have a joint naval exercise, Zair al-Bahar. It's a joint naval exercise between India and Qatar. Geopolitically looking, Qatar is significant for us because it is a member of the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC. And if Qatar is aligned towards India, then the perception of the GCC towards India will be positive on issues like Kashmir or India staking a claim for the permanent membership of the United Nations Security Council, etc. Plus, Qatar has served as a hotspot as the base country for several agreements for mediation talks. For example, the Doha agreement between US and Taliban, that was also finalized in Qatar. Likewise, the current mediation talks between Israel and Hamas to ensure the release of hostages from both sides, that is also happening in Qatar. Plus, Qatar is home to Indian diaspora. The largest expatriate community in Qatar is from India. More than 8 lakh people from India are residing in Qatar, close to 1 million. Now, what is the significance of the entire Gulf region? First, let's have a look at the Gulf region. The Persian Gulf is bounded by Iran. Iraq also shares a small boundary with Persian Gulf, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. The Gulf region has historically civilizational ties with India. It used to serve as a link between India and the West. The Arabs, they were India's conduits to the West as India spread its knowledge, technology. It even sent spices, jewelry, textiles abroad towards West through the Arab region. Likewise, the Arabs gave us pearls, they gave us dates, etc., that we still import from the Middle Eastern region. When we look at the links in terms of diaspora, again the remittances that India receives from the Gulf region is significant. India is the largest remittance receiver in the world, and 40% of the remittances that India receives from outside come from the Gulf region. And there are about 9 million people living in the Gulf Cooperation Council region who are from the Indian origin. The Gulf Cooperation Council consists of 6 countries, that is Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE and Oman. When we look at the energy security perspective, Gulf is significant again because it is proximate to us geographically. So when we import oil and natural gas from the Gulf region, it is cheaper for us because the transportation cost is lower as compared to our imports of gas or oil from USA or Russia, as they are far off from India. Likewise, there are established buyer-seller networks as well, because the sellers who are selling oil in the Gulf region, they are reputed sellers and they continued giving oil to India during the COVID-19 pandemic, or when the sanctions were imposed upon certain countries. For example, sanctions were imposed upon Iran, Venezuela. At that time, the Gulf Cooperation Council region was giving oil to India continuously. And 60% of India's oil and natural gas imports, the needs that India has in terms of energy security, are met by the Gulf Cooperation Council members as well as Iran and Iraq. When we look at the economic relations, again, the Gulf countries have investments in India. As per the data of the DPIIT, the Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, Gulf region has put in investments of about $24 billion since 2000. In the energy sector especially, there are investments in India from the Gulf region. For example, Saudi Aramco investing in India, because India continues to need more and more energy. And 18% of India's foreign trade is with the Gulf region, highlighting the economic importance of the Gulf region. Now let's discuss the challenges that the India-Qatar relations faces. There are a few pain points. For example, Qatar arrested 8 Indian ex-Navy personnel in an espionage case. It was alleged that they were involved in espionage, siphoning off the data of the Qatar submarines to Israel, and they were even awarded a death penalty in Qatar. But India secured the release of 7 out of the 8 personnel. One is still in jail in Qatar. Likewise, Qatar shows a strong Islamic stance. In the past, a party spokesperson in India made some derogatory references to the Prophet, and Qatar criticized it sharply and even asked for a public apology. Qatar is also alleged to be harboring some terrorists, harboring the terrorists who are having links to the Taliban, and it uses its soft power against India at times. For example, it finances its media outlets, for example, Al Jazeera. And Al Jazeera is known to run aggressive anti-India campaigns, for example, regarding Article 370. There are challenges with the Gulf region in general also that India faces. For example, India has to balance the ties between Iran and USA, and there are always tensions between Iran and US. US imposes sanctions upon Iran, but India needs to import oil from Iran so as to diversify the energy imports for India to ensure that India has enough oil imports. Likewise, India has to balance Iran and Saudi Arabia also. The Iran and Saudi Arabia, they are regional rivals. They have rival political and religious ideologies. Iran is the head of the Shia countries and Saudi Arabia is the head of the Sunni countries. Therefore, they have rival political as well as religious ideologies. Then there is the clash between Israel and Palestine. The Arab nations, they are pro-Palestinian cause, whereas India has to maintain a diplomatic stance and a neutral stance between Israel and Palestine. And there are proxy conflicts also in the region. For example, Iran backs various rebels like Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollahs in Lebanon, and India has to deal with that. There are religious and sectarian divides as well. For example, the Shia versus Sunni conflicts, and India needs to maintain its neutrality so as not to appear to be biased. Now, what are the updates between India and Qatar relations? The relationship status has been upgraded to that of a strategic partnership along with a security component. In the Gulf region, India already has a strategic partnership with Kuwait, Oman, UAE and Saudi Arabia. India and Qatar have also signed a double taxation avoidance agreement. The cooperation areas which have been identified between the two countries from the recent meet are trade, investment, energy, security, regional and international forums. They are also exploring the signing of a free trade agreement. India is exploring to sign a free trade agreement with the Gulf Cooperation Council, and India has been strategically ambiguous on the proposal of US President Trump on Gaza. President Trump has made some proposals regarding Gaza, for example, the shifting out of Palestinians from Gaza towards other neighboring countries, for example, Egypt and Jordan. He has grand plans for Gaza, maybe building real estate over there. And the repatriation of Commander Purnendu Tiwari, one of the 8 ex-Indian Navy personnel who is still in Qatar in jail, is pending. The matter remains sub judice in Qatar. And India also participated in the joint business forum between the two countries. Now, what are the suggestions to improve India's relations with Qatar and the Gulf region? One, India needs to be a little more proactive. India needs to implement the Link and Act West policy and promote economic diplomacy. For example, India can also invest in the Gulf region, for example, investing in the renewable energy sector over there, for which there is a huge potential in the Gulf region. We need to diversify our energy sources, the sources in terms of the renewable energy as well as imports of oil and natural gas from the other countries as well. We can go for a neutral diplomacy so that we are able to balance the regional ties, as there are regional rivalries in the Gulf region. We need to promote stability by promoting peace initiatives and regional dialogues, which will be in line with the Indian constitutional philosophy also, as under Article 51, it is the duty of the Indian state to promote international peace and security. And we can also leverage our soft power, as we can leverage our diaspora as well as the cultural and civilizational ties with the West Asian region. Now, there are a couple of PYQs also. In 2016, it was asked which of the following is not a member of Gulf Cooperation Council. Please try to answer it. In 2017, there was a mains question also. The question of India's energy security constitutes the most important part of India's economic progress. Analyze India's energy policy cooperation with the West Asian countries. Please try to write it. There is a mains practice question as well. Discuss the significance of the strategic partnership between India and Qatar. What are the key challenges in the bilateral relationship and what measures can be taken to further strengthen these ties? Please try to write it. Now, the next article is related to India-Nepal relations. The context behind it is that there was an uproar in the Parliament of Nepal regarding the alleged suicide by a student from Nepal, the suicide in the Kalinga Institute of Industrial Technology in Odisha. So we'll discuss the significance of India-Nepal relations and the challenges that the relationship faces. This is important in GS2 under the topic India and its neighborhood relations. First, let's look at the map of Nepal. Nepal is a strategically located country. It is a landlocked country. It is located between India and China. It acts like a buffer state between India and China. It shares its boundary with the Indian states of Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal and Sikkim. Now, what is the significance of India for Nepal? Why does Nepal need India? Because India is the largest trade partner of Nepal. 1/3 of the total foreign direct investments into Nepal are coming from India. When we look at the defense cooperation, India is important for Nepal because India supports Nepal by giving it equipment, by training its army personnel. The two countries also conduct a joint exercise, Surya Kiran. Also, the Gorkha Regiment of Indian Army is partly constituted by recruiting people from the hill districts of Nepal. When we look at the connectivity, there is development of border infrastructure, rail links, and the setting up of integrated checkposts by India on the India-Nepal border. Likewise, there is energy cooperation between the two countries as the agreement on power trade, cross-border transmission, interconnection and grid connectivity was signed between the two countries in 2014. We have a power agreement since 1971 between the two countries. India is also developing hydroelectric projects in Nepal. For example, the building of Arun 3 Run of the River project, the Western Gandak project, Devi Ghat project and the Trisuli hydroelectric project in Nepal with the support of India. And there is the building of the petroleum pipeline from India to Nepal, that is from Motihari to Amlekhganj in Nepal. Also, the two countries have cultural ties. Nepal needs India because there is the Treaty of Peace and Friendship in place since 1950 and there are sister city agreements between Kathmandu, Varanasi and the development of Lumbini, Bodh Gaya, the cultural centers also. And India gives developmental assistance to Nepal as well. For example, India was the first country to respond and give aid to Nepal when it was recovering from the earthquake in 2015. India also gives financial aid to Nepal. Every year we are giving upwards of 500 crore to Nepal in terms of financial aid. But Nepal is also significant for India. Why do we need Nepal, the cordial relations with Nepal? Because geopolitically, it is having a strategic position. It is like a buffer state and it acts like a natural barrier. The natural barrier between the Indian subcontinent and the Tibetan plateau. Geoeconomically, it is important for India because we need a duty-free access to the market of Nepal and we have put in place the India-Nepal Treaty of Trade, the South Asian Free Trade Agreement, SAFTA as it is known, and India gets energy from Nepal. India needs energy and Nepal has immense hydropower potential and therefore through the power exchange agreement both the countries benefit. Geostrategically looking, India needs good relations with Nepal for ensuring regional stability. For example, if the concerns of the Madhesi people who reside in the southern Tarai region in Nepal are not addressed, it will lead to conflicts within Nepal, which will also enter into India as well, causing regional instability. And we need cooperation for ensuring law enforcement, counter-terrorism, etc. Now, what are the challenges in the India-Nepal relations? One, there is a trade imbalance between the two countries. That is, India exports to Nepal way more than it imports from Nepal, leading to the imbalance in trade. Then there are the border disputes. The boundary between India and Nepal was essentially defined through the Treaty of Sugoli in 1816. There was a 2-year Anglo-Nepalese war between 1814 to 1816, post which the Treaty of Sugoli was signed. As per the Treaty of Sugoli, the boundary of Nepal and India was to be determined in the western region through the river Kali and the eastern region through the river Mechi. But there is a difference of opinion regarding the origin of Kali river. India says that the Kali river originates from the southern part of Kalapani area, whereas Nepal says that Kali river originates from somewhere near Limpidhara. Therefore, Nepal claims that the Limpidhara, Kalapani, Lipu Lake, they are part of Nepal's territory. The Kalapani area is significant. As it is strategically located, the Kalapani area is the tri-junction between India, Nepal and China. And it has also been under the administrative control of India only, especially since the 1962 Indo-China War. Then Nepal released a new map in 2019 claiming not only Kalapani, Limpidhara and Lipu Lake Pass, but also having claims upon Susta. Susta region is in Bihar, that is the eastern boundary also. In 2015, Nepal adopted a new constitution. Now, when it adopted the new constitution, it did not take into account India's suggestions to ensure that the Madhesi rights are protected. The Madhesis, they are living in the southern Tarai region in Nepal. They want proportional representation. They are marginalized in Nepal and therefore they protest there. Therefore, India even imposed an economic blockade upon Nepal. But it did not lead to a very positive result as there was a pro-China tilt also which was seen for some time. And Nepal even gave calls for the revision of the Friendship Treaty of 1950, saying that the Friendship Treaty of 1950 between India and Nepal is outdated. It is giving too much power to India and it started accusing India of having a big brotherly attitude, of accusing of interference in Nepal's internal matters, although which is not true. Then there are certain delays also in the projects that India takes up in Nepal. For example, the Mahakali Treaty was signed in 1996 for the implementation of the Pancheshwar multipurpose project, but decades delay leads to negative results. Then there are concerns due to the open border between India and Nepal. For example, the trafficking happens through India-Nepal border, fake currency, drugs and arms smuggling also happens. There is the angle of Chinese influence also, which is there in Nepal. For example, its inclination to participate in Belt and Road Initiative, which violates Indian territorial integrity and sovereignty, and its cooperation with China in the Trans-Himalayan Multidimensional Connectivity Network, the Sino-Nepal military exercises being conducted now. So what are the suggestions to address the challenges in the India-Nepal relations? India can explore the backdoor diplomacy or track 2 diplomacy as it is known, so that we are able to engage the entire political spectrum to build a good image for India. And we can also set up a joint technical boundary committee to ensure that the boundary disputes between the two countries are resolved at the earliest. And we can't afford to lose the perception battle. It is of paramount importance. India needs to show that it has mutual respect, it respects the sovereignty of Nepal, and we do not interfere in their internal matters. We can invest in high-impact community development projects. These projects will ensure that the goodwill of India is strengthened in Nepal, and we can ensure a timely completion of projects. This will ensure that Nepal does not partner with China for the development projects in Nepal, and Nepal does not fall prey to the checkbook diplomacy of China. And we can ensure the economic diplomacy and leveraging cultural ties and soft power with Nepal. Now there is a main practice question as well. India-Nepal relations have historically been marked by strong cultural, economic and geopolitical ties. However, recent tensions have affected this bilateral relationship. Analyze the significance of India-Nepal relations, identify the key challenges faced, and suggest measures to enhance cooperation and resolve existing issues. Please try to write it. Now, the next article is related to the rarest of rare doctrine regarding the imposition of death penalty in India. This is important in GS2 under governance. The article highlights the contrasting stance that the judiciary has taken in 2 cases. In one case, that is the brutal rape and murder of a medical student in the Kolkata's R.G. Kar medical case, the court said that it does not belong to the rarest of rare category and hence death penalty was not awarded. But in the Sharon murder case, the court awarded death penalty. This was a case of poisoning, whereby a poison was mixed in an Ayurvedic concoction, and the court said that it belongs to the rarest of rare category. This has reignited the issue of how to determine whether the case belongs to the rarest of rare category and whether to award death penalty. Now, what are the origins of the rarest of rare doctrine for awarding death penalty? First, in 1972, in Jagmohan Singh versus State of Uttar Pradesh, the Supreme Court first upheld the constitutionality of death penalty, saying that the awarding of death penalty does not amount to the violation of Article 21 of the Constitution. This will be in line with the criminal laws in India, and no clear guidelines were given for the application of death penalty at that time by the court. In Rajendra Prasad versus State of Uttar Pradesh, the court said that whenever a death penalty is awarded, 2 things must be done. One, the court has to record the special reasons for awarding the death penalty, for choosing the sentence of death penalty and not awarding life imprisonment in a case. And the death penalty has to be awarded only in extraordinary circumstances. In 1918, Bachchan Singh versus State of Punjab, the Supreme Court said that the rarest of rare doctrine has to be observed. This was the introduction of the doctrine, but the Supreme Court again didn't define it clearly. It was defined better in 1983 in the Machi Singh versus State of Punjab case, where the court said that there are 5 categories of cases which will be treated as the rarest of rare cases. In those cases, the death penalty can be awarded. The 5 categories in the Machi Singh case were enlisted by the Supreme Court, saying that if the manner of committing the murder by the perpetrator is such that it is brutal and it can be considered as a dastardly crime, then the death penalty can be awarded. It will be treated as a rarest of the rare case. If the motive of murder is such that it is committed with total depravity, meanness, then it can be treated as rarest of the rare case. And if the crime is of a socially abhorrent nature, it is a hate crime or bias crime, for example, the crimes against scheduled tribes, etc., then again it can be considered as a rarest of the rare case. If the magnitude of crime is such that it is having a large scale impact, then also it can be considered as a rarest of the rare case, for example, the murder of an entire family. And the personality of the offender has also to be considered. For example, if he is committing crimes against vulnerable victims like children, elderly, etc., then also it will be treated as a rarest of the rare case and death penalty can be awarded. Now, have there been any revisions to the death penalty application? Yes. In Mithu versus State of Punjab, the Supreme Court struck down the Section 303 of the Indian Penal Code. Section 303 prescribed the death penalty as the only punishment in case a person who is serving life imprisonment commits a murder. But it was struck down by the court saying that it violates Article 14 and Article 21 because death penalty cannot be the only punishment in case of the commission of a crime. It has to be decided by the judiciary depending upon the mitigating circumstances of that case. In September 2022, the Supreme Court even referred this to a constitutional bench because the application of mitigating circumstances before declaring a crime as the rarest of the rare has to be done. Now, the next article is related to the bail granted by the Supreme Court to Ranveer Allahbadia and the gag order that the court issued curtailing his freedom of speech. This is important in GS2 under the topic governance. The Supreme Court granted interim protection from arrest to the accused, Ranveer Allahbadia. He had made some obscene remarks on a YouTube show which were heavily criticized by the Supreme Court, but he was granted interim protection from arrest. This is like granting anticipatory bail, the bail before arrest itself. But there were certain conditions that were imposed by the Supreme Court. The conditions include that Allahbadia and his associates can't air any content on social media until further orders are issued by the court. Also, his passport has been forfeited. The passport deposited means that he cannot leave the country pending trial until further orders are issued. And the Supreme Court highlighted that there is a vacuum in the regulation of online content posted by YouTubers or celebrities, etc. And it has sought the assistance of the Attorney General as well in this case. Now, what was the plea of the petitioner? The petitioner pleaded that multiple FIRs are being registered against him in several parts of the country and he cannot appear physically in court in all the parts of the country. Therefore, they should be clubbed together, they should be heard together at one place, at one court, and also his Article 32 should be safeguarded. That is, he should not be arrested by the police, he should be safeguarded from arbitrary police action, arbitrary arrest from the police, which has been granted by the court. And there was a pattern of multiple FIRs. It has been observed by the court also that different jurisdictions are registering the FIR for the same offense, and it puts an unnecessary restriction upon the liberty of the individual as well, because until proven guilty, the person is presumed to be innocent. Now, the Supreme Court's gag order says that further FIRs cannot be lodged, and even the two FIRs in Jaipur and Guwahati, they were also stayed, and any future FIRs on similar allegations will not be lodged. The Supreme Court also allowed Allahbadia to approach the police for protection against threats, since he is receiving threats from all quarters. But there is an unusual condition which has been imposed by the court. That is the prohibition of speech before it even occurs. That is the gag order, that he cannot post any content on social media. Now, can the courts impose conditions while granting bail? Yes. Section 438 subclause 2 of the Criminal Procedure Code allows the courts to impose conditions while granting bail. It is known as the conditional bail. What are the conditions that the courts commonly impose while granting bail to the accused? They can deposit the passports so that the accused is not able to flee the country. They can impose a bail bond, a surety that the accused has to furnish before he can be granted bail, that is a monetary value can be set. Also, he can be required to periodically appear before the police so that he is cooperating in the investigation, in the trial, etc. But if the bail conditions imposed by the courts are too onerous, if they are too heavy for the accused, then the Supreme Court usually criticizes it. For example, if the bail bond or the surety set for granting bail to the accused by the lower courts is too high, that it is beyond the reach of the accused, then it amounts to the selling of bail by the courts and it is criticized by the court. And the Supreme Court had earlier also even observed that the gag orders, they restrict free speech. Usually it is considered like a prior restraint, that is before even speaking you are gagged, you cannot speak, you are not allowed to speak, and it was criticized in an earlier ruling in 2022 in the Mohammed Zubair case. Mohammed Zubair was the co-founder of Alt News. The Supreme Court had rejected an order of the lower court which had prevented the use of social media by Mohammed Zubair while granting bail. The Supreme Court in that case had observed that the blanket gag order will amount to the violation of Article 19, Clause 1, Clause A. That is, the freedom of speech and expression will be violated, and the blanket gag order will be disproportionate and unjustified for the bail conditions which are imposed. But in this ruling, the Supreme Court has itself imposed a gag order upon Ranveer Allahbadia. Now, the next article is related to the imploding crypto meme coins. This is important in GS3 under economy. The president of Argentina, Javier Milei, promoted a crypto meme coin known as Libra. He promoted it on social media. It was linked to a Solana contract address. It was linked to a website also. But he had to delete his post within a few hours as there was backlash. Because within a few hours of its promotion, the promoters of the meme coin cashed out. They cashed out with millions, and the retail investors, they lost their money. Now, what are the characteristics of the meme coins? One, they are highly volatile. They are inspired by the internet trends, by the cultural trends, by the fear of missing out. The retail investor wants to put in money because of that greed of earning that quick cash, multiplication of returns. But they don't have any intrinsic value. Still, they see dramatic price changes. And they are even indicators of the retail investors' risk appetite in the crypto markets. Now, how did the Libra coin implode? Initially, there was success. After its launch, the market capitalization increased rapidly to $4.5 billion shortly after its launch. But there was an equally rapid decline as well. Within hours, $87 million were cashed out by the insiders, by the promoters of the coin. Therefore, the retail investors lost their money. $4.4 billion of value was erased. Now there are legal actions which are pending there. The lawyers started filing suits. They filed fraud complaints against the president of Argentina. They alleged illicit association between the president of Argentina and the promoters of the meme coin. And they alleged fraud in the promotion as well, because the promotion was done by the Argentinian president on the social media. When we look at the global landscape of crypto, it is rising because prominent figures have been promoting it. There was a surge in the crypto market after President Trump won the elections in the US elections recently. President Trump and Melania launched their meme coins. This raised regulatory concerns also. Even the heads in the USA, for example, the lead of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Paul Atkins, the advisor to President Trump, Elon Musk, they are also supporters of the cryptocurrencies. And it signals a favorable crypto regulatory environment in the coming future. The next article is related to the declining marriages in China and the lessons that India can learn from the Chinese story. This is important in GS1 under the topic social issues. The marriage registrations in China have declined. They have declined 20% from 2023. They have been at the lowest level since 1986. Why? Because there are high living costs in China. There is a rising urban unemployment in China. Therefore, women are reluctant to marry. As per the surveys, 44% of urban women in China are choosing not to marry. This is leading to a demographic challenge because the population in China has been declining. Last 3 years, the Chinese population has declined. The deaths have been more than the births in 2022. Initially, China adopted a one-child policy in 1980s. This one-child policy led to the long-term impacts upon the population growth. It led to population imbalances. Although China tried to correct it, it changed the policy. It took up a two-child policy in 2016 and adopted a three-child policy in 2021. But these policy changes have failed to increase the birth rates. There is also a sex ratio imbalance which is being observed in China because of the desire for male children in China. All these factors have contributed to the increase in the aging population in China. Currently, 22% of China's population is aged over 60 years of age. And it is expected that by 2050, 50% of China's population will be aged over 60 years. Therefore, there will be a decline in the working age population. That is, the people from 18 to 59 years of age will be having a lesser proportion in the total population of China. And the pension funds are also expected to run out by 2035 itself if the aging population keeps on growing at this pace. Therefore, as a temporary measure, the retirement age in China has been increased from 60 to 63 years for men and 55 years for women, but this can only act as a temporary solution. This aging population has had a social and economic impact as well. For example, it can be a detriment to the economic future and the government stability in China. And what is acting as a deterrent is the high child rearing cost in China. Therefore, people do not want to give births or even marry in China. And simultaneously, there is a decrease in the care services. For example, the kindergartens are shutting down in China. What has been the government response? The government there has adopted only top-down policies. Rather than allowing the society to evolve by itself, they have enforced policies from the top. Now, President Xi Jinping in China has given a call. He has called for women to actively cultivate a culture of marriage and childbearing in China. But this policy making from the top has a disconnect with the society. These policies, they are alleged to be serving only the party interests in China. Now, the next article is related to agricultural protectionism and the tariffs that India imposes upon imports in India. This is important in GS3 under Indian economy. When we look at the average duty that India imposes upon the imports in India, that is the import tariffs, it is one of the highest in the world. In 2023, the average duty for imports in India was 17%. For USA, it is just about 3.3%. When we compare with similar countries, for example, BRICS, again, India's import tariffs are one of the highest. India imposes at about 17%, Brazil at about 11%, South Africa and China at about 6%, EU around 5% or so. When we compare the import tariffs of India and USA especially, the number of products on which the two countries impose tariffs, they are quite similar. The number of products on which import tariffs are imposed are similar, but the tariffs are high in India, especially when we look at the agricultural products. The tariffs on the agricultural products is more than double that of the tariffs on the non-agricultural products in India, as we want to protect the domestic producers. What are the reasons behind these high agricultural tariffs? Because we want to ensure food security and livelihoods in the agriculture sector. We have low investments in the agriculture sector, just about 6% of total investment in India. And it will be difficult for us to reduce the tariffs on the agricultural imports in India because the US agriculture products will start flooding Indian market as they are subsidized in USA. There are product-specific tariffs also in India. For example, there are high tariffs which are imposed upon the agriculture products, dairy, beverages and tobacco where the duty is more than 30%. Whereas we are decreasing tariffs in some sectors like transport equipment, cotton, textiles, etc. But we are increasing tariffs also in certain sectors, for example, electrical machinery, leather and footwear and some manufactured goods as well. So what has been the response of USA to the tariffs? President Trump had commented regarding the reciprocal tariffs, but the details are still not clear and this Ambiguity regarding the reciprocal tariffs is causing unease in India. What has been India's action? In response, India has reduced tariffs on certain products, for example, bourbon whiskey from 150% to 100% only. When we look at the India-US trade dynamics, it is particularly important because India's export to US has been significant. It's upwards of $50 billion in fiscal year 2025 from April to November itself, and 18% of India's total exports is going to USA. It was just 15% in 2015. The reciprocal tariffs may have a negative impact upon India. For example, it will create a pressure on India to reduce agricultural tariffs. It may push India to import more from US, which may not be economically advantageous for India. So what has been India's position in this regard? India opposes tariff negotiations on the agricultural products for the free trade agreements as of now. Thank you.